So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay. The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me and begin dropping in on the ones that looked far more interesting.
Welcome to Hollywood English. Now, normally on this channel, we do lessons based on TV shows and movies, but today we're doing something a bit different and I think pretty special. We're going to break down part of the famous Steve Jobs speech at Stanford University in 2005. Just around 2 minutes of it. This speech is incredibly inspirational and powerful. Jobs isn't talking about business or technology here. He's talking more about life, about mistakes, curiosity, and how small choices can shape your future. By the way, did you know that Jobs dropped out of university after just 6 months? To drop out means to stop going to school or college before finishing. Let's watch the clip and then we'll break down all the terms and all the vocab. And after that, it's your turn because you'll be using the teleprompter to practice this speech. Let's get started.
Reed College at that time offered perhaps the best calligraphy instruction in the country. Throughout the campus, every poster, every label on every drawer was beautifully hand calligraphed. Because I had dropped out and didn't have to take the normal classes, I decided to take a calligraphy class to learn how to do this. I learned about serif and sans-serif typefaces, about varying the amount of space between different letter combinations, about what makes great typography great. It was beautiful, historical, artistically subtle in a way that science can't capture, and I found it fascinating. None of this had even a hope of any practical application in my life. But 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. And we designed it all into the Mac. It was the first computer with beautiful typography. If I had never dropped in on that single course in college, the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. And since Windows just copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have them. If I had never dropped out, I would have never dropped in on that calligraphy class, and personal computers might not have the wonderful typography that they do. Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
Jobs begins with a memory from Reed College, the school he once attended even after he had dropped out. He says that at the time, Reed offered the best classes in calligraphy in the country.
Reed College at that time offered perhaps the best calligraphy instruction in the country.
Calligraphy means beautiful artistic handwriting. It's not practical like maths or science. It's about style and beauty. Jobs remembers how every poster and label on campus was carefully designed. That's where he discovered the world of typefaces, styles of letters, and learned the difference between serif and sans-serif.
I learned about serif and sans-serif typefaces, about varying the amount of space between different letter combinations, about what makes great typography great.
A serif typeface has small decorative lines at the ends of letters, like Times New Roman. Sans-serif means without those lines, like Arial.
It was beautiful, historical, artistically subtle in a way that science can't capture.
Jobs calls this work artistically subtle. Subtle means small or gentle but important. It's the kind of detail you notice only when it's missing. For example, the chef used a subtle spice that made the dish taste richer without being strong.
None of this had even a hope of any practical application in my life.
When Jobs talks about the calligraphy class, he says that none of this had any hope of any practical application in my life. A practical application means a real-world use, something you can actually apply in daily work or life, not just theory. It's about usefulness, not beauty. For example, learning how to code has many practical applications, like building websites and apps.
But 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. And we designed it all into the Mac.
Then he jumps 10 years ahead to the moment he was creating the first Macintosh computer. He says everything he learned about letters and spacing suddenly mattered. The Macintosh, or Mac, was Apple's first personal computer with a screen, mouse, and visual design. Before that, computers only showed plain text, no beauty, no fonts. Jobs made sure the Mac had many typefaces and clean designs, all inspired by that calligraphy class.
If I had never dropped in on that single course in college, the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts.
He talks about how letters can be spaced proportionally, each one taking up only the space it needs, instead of every letter being the same width. Proportionally means in the right size or amount compared to something else. For example, the artist arranged the shapes proportionally so the design looked balanced.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later.
To connect the dots means to see how separate moments in your life can fit together later on. You can't see the pattern while it's happening, only when you look back. For example, after years of different jobs, she finally connected the dots and saw how each one taught her something useful.
You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever.
And then he says you have to trust your gut, to believe in that quiet feeling inside that tells you something is right. Your gut means your instinct, not your stomach. It's what guides you when logic isn't enough. For example, he trusted his gut and turned down the deal. Later, he was glad that he did. Karma is an idea from Indian philosophy. It means what you do comes back to you.
Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path, and that will make all the difference.
Jobs ends this section by saying that believing the dots will connect gives you the courage to follow your heart, even if it takes you off the well-worn path, which is a safe, ordinary route that everyone else takes. To follow your heart means to do what feels right deep inside, not what others expect from you. It's used when someone makes personal or emotional choices. For example, she followed her heart and became a teacher instead of taking a higher paying job. A well-worn path means a safe, familiar way that many people have taken before. It's often used for traditional or predictable life choices. For example, he left the well-worn path of law school to start a small bakery. Jobs is reminding us that real creativity doesn't always come from safety. Sometimes it begins the moment you decide to step off that well-worn path and follow your heart.
Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path, and that will make all the difference.
To make all the difference means to change something in an important way. For example, that teacher's advice made all the difference in my life. Now it's your turn. Steve's tone here is calm, thoughtful, and honest. He's not performing, he's reflecting. Use the teleprompter tool to practice this amazing speech. Say it slowly, trust your voice, and follow your heart, like he says. Thanks so much for joining me today on Hollywood English. If you found value, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you're looking for another similar video where you can practice your speaking, check this one out. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
You go on and stamp your form, Sonny, and stop wasting my time. Because to tell you the truth, I don't give a shit.